refugees and asylum seekers, and mostly coming from the states or the countries of Somalia, South Sudan. We even have others coming all the way from the DRC, and that is what we will be looking at, and especially now that aid is slowly but surely dwindling. Allow me to rope in my panel of experts. Beginning from my immediate left, we have Stella Suge, who is the Executive Director for Film Aid Kenya. Karibu Stella.
Asante sana.
And just next to Stella, we have John, Commissioner for Refugee Affairs in Kenya. Karibu sana, Bwana Mburugo.
Thank you, Mr. Jue.
Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yes.
Maybe to kick off this live discussion, where are we in refugees and in Kenya, and what are the numbers? What are the current numbers that we have?
We continue as a country to host refugees. Currently, we have 853,074 registered refugees and asylum seekers. Mm-hmm. This is a number that has been growing over time. 2 years ago, in March 2023, we had about 530,000. It means that we have had a continuous influx of refugees from the East Africa, Horn of Africa, Great Lakes region. And lately we have some Afghanistans who have also come to the country.
We have
Afghanistan, yes, and we will discuss more in relation to why they have come all the way, whether they are regard, and be able to treat them.
And very quickly, what is the difference between asylum seekers?
A refugee who has expressed of persecution from genocide, whether from religious point, from a political conflict, and lately obviously from the climate push, and has sought refuge in at least the neighboring country. And what we have in Kenya is a population of refugees who have been generated by the protracted situation of conflict in the region. And you see what is happening in DR Congo, what is happening in what has happened in Somalia, and those are the push bring the refugees to the country. We also see of the climate change, extreme drought, loss of livelihood to our herders, refuge to try and recollect their lives from what losses has been there. These are obligated under the UN Convention of 1951 to welcome, host, and secure refugees, mainly coming from conflict situations. And that is what started in Kenya in early independence time. And this was compounded in 1990s when Somalia regime of the late Said Barre then seen refugees from the Horn region. And they come in terms of women, children, persons, persons with disability. Mostly we are hosting 5,000 in Dadaab, 5,000 of, and about 306,000 in Kakuma. In urban areas, for those who are self-reliant, they are in urban areas, maybe they had a trade or a profession, a doctor, a teacher. Some have been able to find how they are able to survive in terms of livelihoods. We have a doctor in Kayore who runs his own clinic. So those ones, we have 1,000 who are in urban areas, 60% being in Nairobi. And then we have Nakuru, Mombasa, Eldoret, and Kiambu, Isinya, Ruiru, and the others that we find in this area. So that is the refugee situation.
Okay, and you'll be telling us what exactly the government is doing to plug the big gap that has been left by Madam Stella at film to the refugees.
Good morning, and many, but also to talk about World Refugee refugees, I think it's a very important to shine a light on the people that have been forcibly also being, because important player in the region. The commissioner has talked about a lot of displacement from Somalia. Kenya is that country that is number of people. So thank you for making time to talk about World Refugee Day, and the commission sits alongside you to talk about this, because it was and the work that the government of Kenya is. So personally, I am the executive director of FilmAid Kenya. Mainly our role is and local communities, refugee camps, that obviously have for information. When you cross the border, you come from Somalia, you get into Dadaab and find that there are 45 actors, then you need somebody to tell you really what is going on, where to access the many different services from health, education, what you call protection, what is the government doing. You need somebody that directs you, gives information to understand the ecosystem and how to operate within that context. If you look at currently, the influx into Kakuma, there's a lot of, so just to envision or to visualize how a reception center is that you find 500 people who have come from different places, and they don't know, for example, how to eventually get a house, or how to eventually get any other kind of service. If I'm sick, where do I actually get that service? So it's to ensure that the population that is in this type of need understand where to get what, where, and when, and what are your rights, and also what are your responsibilities, because obviously you cannot, as a person, be without responsibility. So it's really to clarify, to create an environment where all those people that have been displaced have an understanding. And one of the critical roles that FilmAid is playing is also ensuring that the population outside of the refugees, say for example the local communities in Garissa County, in Turkana County, or even in Nairobi, or engagement with persons like yourselves in the media, the wider Kenyan community, actually have greater awareness about the presence of refugees, and to have a greater understanding about the presence of refugees, because of course not everybody knows why people have left their country, come all the way from DRC to come to Kenya, left Somalia or left South Sudan, and they're as far as the Commission has pointed out, all the way from Afghanistan. So if we are hosting people, it's very important that as the hosts we know why these people are here. And I think for us, it's very important that we create an environment of understanding and empathy, because part of the challenges of displacement is in fact the trauma that people experience while they leave their homes. You know, one of the famous stories of refugee displacement is in fact in the beginning of Kakuma, when we had the nearly 1,000 young then Sudanese boys who left Sudan to go into Ethiopia and to come into Kenya, which is a very traumatic experience. So to really create that awareness, understanding, is something critical for us to then create an environment of empathy, and for us as Kenyans to also understand what is it that I can do at an individual level, for you as Njue, for myself as Stella, or for the Commissioner. What is it that we can all do to create a better environment for literally our brothers and sisters who are coming from across the countries.
And beyond, you've noted that you do provide information, and beyond information and psychosocial support, how does FilmAid empower these refugees economically?
So we, I would say proudly, in the information age, provide skills development across communication, mainly in film, but also digital media and the use of the arts, which is also a very important communication tool within Africa. We know that in Africa, you know, we do a lot of music, visual art, performance art. So we ensure that those skills are nurtured and developed to fruition, and also then support the communities to be in the lead in communication about the issues that affect them. At the end of the day, I can never really speak about the plight of refugees as a refugee, because I don't have that experience. I haven't left my country. I don't live in a small space or lacking funding, so I don't have the same experience. So we make sure that refugees become their own advocates. They talk about their own issues and the issues affecting their communities. And more broadly across the globe, we are seeing refugees, therefore, who are empowered, who've received communication skills, being the ones that are advocating for other refugees who don't have either the skills or the platforms. So PhilMade, during such events, we are honored to be able to engage in this particular manner. But also we have the annual film festival, which is a platform that refugees then present their creative works, but also is a platform where they talk about the issues that affect them.
Commissioner, back to you. I think USAID is one of the biggest aid organization in the world, and specifically when it comes to refugees in the country. How much are we talking about? How much has been taken away from the refugees by USAID and other organizations, if there are other organizations who have pulled out of assisting them?
I would first maybe is to say that as a Department for Government in Management and Administration of Refugees, we work with the partners, UNHCR, PhilMade, World Food Programme, UNICEF, USAID, and all others that are within the space, IRC and many others. I would say that the government has been working with the partners in the humanitarian support. But understandably, Mr. Njue, the world has or did recognize that there is unsustainability in humanitarian approach way back in 2016. And I think from there, we have had progressive interventions and strategies to see how best the refugees would be hosted by the hosting countries. Kenya has participated in the Global on Compact for Refugees. We developed our own share, what is we call the sustainable share for refugee and the host community as an socio-economic intervention. We have now developed what we call Shirika Plan as a socio-economic inclusion and integration of refugees into the national government service delivery system.
Yes, I noted while I was doing this research, I noted the Shirika Plan, and you're going to be telling us how exactly it's moving in to help those people.
Going back to the humanitarian support and the loss. World Food Programme is the one that takes the bigger chunk of the humanitarian support in relation to the monthly tokens and minimum basket that they are given. If I paint a picture, in 2023 we were at 60% minimum basket, meaning that the basket would have milk, beans, rice, and the nutrients that are necessary per household. In 2024, we came to 45%, meaning that the basket shrunk. And at this time, we are 30%, meaning further shrinking of the minimum basket. What does that mean? It means that, and over and above that, since June this year, we used to have 850 shillings, Baba Chakula, that they would be disbursed to the refugees through Safaricom. That has been stopped. If I take that first, 850 shillings to 200,000 refugees in the camp of Kakuma is 170 million injection per month, meaning that they are able to get that extra, which the basket is not providing. And that means that the family would somehow be able to eke a living for the month. What was that supporting? It was supporting what we call the credit system economy, where there is a distributor, there is a wholesaler, there is a retailer, there is a shopkeeper, and then there is a refugee. All that chain has been broken by stopping 850 shillings disbursement in humanitarian support. Looking at the basket itself, it means that the shrinking to 20% that is expected in August will imply that the mothers who are breastfeeding, the school-going children, cannot sustainably again continue going to school. The breastfeeding children, we expect malnutrition to spike up. What about the overall household reactions? Of course, there is depression. They have no other alternative source of livelihoods. There is a lot of domestic violence. People are having hopelessness and depression. They cannot be able to see what next for their lives. We are having thefts. They think that the other household has some extra unga, extra flour and oil or something. And therefore, a lot of thefts are there. Common fights from a lot of, a lot of tension, a lot of displacement in terms of the expectations that I am going to get something. Over and above that, even when we introduce the aspect of intervention for what we are going to talk about, Shirika Plan, it is not an immediate solution. The immediate solution is the food. And that is a challenge that we have seen a lot of protests coming up, a challenge of what we have just spoken about, the spike in criminality, because people have to survive. But they're in a camp situation. And we have, together with the partners, we have to get a solution. The stoppage, which was quite abrupt, by the American administration in support of World Food Program, which was doing 80% of the support to World Food Program, has really affected that. That includes even the other sustainability interventions, small irrigation schemes, agriculture interventions, maybe how they could keep 1 or 2 livestock in terms of goats that they could milk. All this has gone down. And that means that we have a serious humanitarian challenge. 3 months. By September, we'll have a lot of chaos in these camps. Lastly, the aspect of USAID. USAID used to support us in running Level 4 hospital in Kakuma, meaning that they were supporting the medical, non-pharmaceutical, as well as the medical personnel. And that, with the stoppage, is under challenge.
So
we
whatever
do
you
not know who is coming to step in.
Yeah.
Not the county government, not the national government. Because of the abruptness, of course, budgets had been done. And right now, county government cannot employ new medical personnel. Neither can it take up the ones who are there. So for now, the ones who are serving, they are serving like humanitarian, because you said already gave them a notice and they are just there. Other partners are trying to step in. And by the way, 60%, 60 staff have been laid off by International Refugee Council, who are the implementing partner for UNHCR in the health sector. That means that International Refugee Council can no longer sustainably support the medical personnel. That presents the challenge of medical access to the refugee as well as the hosts. And that is the scenario we have in the country. So, it is quite dire. And we need to be able to get an intervention immediately. So,
Commissioner, what you're telling us is that the situation is not just by USAID alone. From the figures that you have, 60% to 45% to 30%, it has been gradual, just not USAID that has just pulled out. A number of also humanitarian organizations have pulled out as well.
World Food Program presents the frontline humanitarian support. It gets support from other partners. The American government has been giving 80% of that humanitarian support in terms of cereals and all others that composed the basket, minimum basket. However, that has stopped. World Food Program is running up and down to see how best can we be able to talk to other partners. But there is no partner who is not challenged. Yeah? The inward-looking policy of the current administration in America has really affected the humanitarian space. And that landscape has even gone to Europe, where the countries in Europe are also holding back. So it now behoves the hosting country, Kenya, and the few partners that may step forward to be able to bridge the gap. It is not going to be easy. We are under a very serious rough patch moving forward, because we are hosting over 800,000, as I mentioned, and they must be sustained in terms of food. Just as you require food yourself, I also are in a situation where I have to see what partners are we speaking to, We have socialized the government, we have sensitized the government in terms of the leadership, executive leadership of the country, that it is important that we look now straight in the eye the aspect of the humanitarian crisis that may present itself, including the aspects of criminality.
Yes, yes.
In the aspect moving forward because of this stoppage.
Yes, and we will be looking at what exactly you are doing in matter security and also bridging that gap. But looking at Film Aid, you're known for your media entrepreneur training skills, and you've just alluded to that. How can you elaborate on this? Can you elaborate on this when it comes to how these types of skill sets are helping refugees turn around their fortune, and especially in the light of dwindling humanitarian aid?
So thank you very much. Just allow me to link it as well to what the Commissioner has talked about. The reduction in funding, mainly from US government, has broader impact because it means we are reprogramming, reprioritizing, and one of the I would say the strides forward that we were making was actually around ensuring that communities were starting to become self-sustaining. That means the many of us actors were providing training, and whether it's startups to ensure that those who are able to do business, or for example those who are part of the food distribution value chain, were becoming self-sustaining and therefore moving out of the cycle of vulnerability and reliance and dependence on the aid. So those are nearly the first casualties that in the face of reduction in healthcare, education, protection and food security, it means we are redirecting most of the resources back to the most essential services, and therefore we are reducing on taking the communities really away from the dependency. And that is a major, I would say it's a major loss from the direction that we're going, because obviously long term of ensuring that communities were out of the dependency would have meant long term there would have been less need for as much funding as we currently have. So just to put into perspective, if you look at a student that has graduated from Film Aid, it means that an individual would get a basket from, not a basket, a startup kit, which means that Film Aid would have given a camera and a computer for that individual to start their own business. But it means now that funding is being redirected. So previously that individual within 1 year would have been providing for their family nearly independently of the food assistance and all that. And one of the things also that you would see, if that individual is taking their child to school, they don't have to particularly take them to the school within Kakuma. They could have gone to better schools in other parts of Kenya, and therefore in the long term would have seen a better education, of course from the schools that are in other parts of the country, and preparing those individuals for long-term durable solutions, whether when they go back to Somalia, South Sudan and other countries, or when they access durable solutions and go to Europe or go to the US, they would have been more prepared because of better education. And long term, if you talk about somebody being able to run their own business, it's not only the refugees that would benefit, but also the Kenyan communities. If you look at again what the Commissioner talked about, 800 shillings per person per month, it really injects reasonable income into the economy, for which the Kenyan communities are the beneficiaries, because they're the ones who are driving the value chain of the food, from this part of the country all the way to Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps. So I think the loss of this direction of ensuring the independence of the communities is actually something that has been lost. And from our perspective as well, for all of us, our individual ability to provide for our families is part and parcel of who we are as human beings, and is very much linked to what we define as our own dignity. That I can take care of my children. If they are sick and there is no space at the hospital in the camp, I can take them to Lodwar, I can take them to Garissa, and that now is reduced because, generally then dependence is the vulnerability, is the taking away of dignity. So for Film Aid, we have been providing training, and most of those individuals over the last about 15 years have already gone on to create their own independent media houses and are running their own businesses. And you know, of course, in communication age, all of us are able to take care of our brands. We need, you know, video production, photography, advertising, and of course amplifying the messages of what we are doing, our programs, and that has been what then our students are able to do. So we currently have about 20 media houses that are born out of FilmAid's media training program, and most of them are, of course, when they go back to their countries of origin, either South Sudan, Somalia, DRC, and other countries, actually are starting up their own businesses as own media houses. So we know quite a number of individuals who've left Dadaab and Kakuma to Somalia and South Sudan who are running media houses, including running a film festival in Juba, which we have to be proud of. You know, we are,
yes,
and I think, you know, media is something very important, also because it's a way that we document our culture. Because if I tell my story, then I'm able today to document my background as an individual from the Lotuko community, which long term, you know, 20 years from today, is something that will be very important in terms of understanding who that community is. Because of course the world is changing, people are moving, and that culture can easily be left or forgotten. If you look at something important as part of our identity as culture, some of the stories are, our role is to provide the communication skills, but most of the stories are told in the local languages. And that also is something that's very important in documenting. And that's what people take pride in, as they identify who they are, and they are able to keep that. Or if you talk about music, if you talk about theater, if you talk about poetry, that's an identity of a people that has been displaced, and they are able to you know, have a glimpse of their own culture. Last year we did a story of the Burundian drums, which even I was learning that on the spot on production, that the drums can communicate so many things. The Burundian drum, it can be the sound of a celebration. It can also be the sound of war. It can also be the sound of mourning, or any part of what the society represents. You learn so many things through arts and and of course through media, and it is something now that we are able to document and archive, and that long term will be something valuable. And I think for the countries of origin where the social fabric has been destroyed, like Somalia and South Sudan, it's very important that these individuals go back and rebuild the media in those countries and have the skills. Also to communicate, obviously, is part and parcel of today's society.
You're right. Picking from where Stella has left, we are looking at a reduction of 30%. And I was watching one of the international organizations in regards, international media house, in regards to what they are reporting. And they indicate that reduced food rations are causing a lot of friction. Yes. I think you've noted, rightly noted that. How are you bridging the funding gap? And what does it mean for a child in Kakuma and Dadaab who was used at least two or three meals per day? And what is the urgent mitigation strategy that your State Department is looking at?
Of course, the management of refugee affairs is a collective responsibility. The refugee is an international citizen, where the host community is obligated, the host country is obligated as a signatory and party to the UN Convention, and the international community to support. And as a government, we are doing what we are supposed to do. We welcome, we provide security, as well as document and give access to the services that we are able to support in terms of education, in terms of health, access to water. Beyond that, in terms of humanitarian support, the food support, that is the responsibility of the international community. And it is a joint effort. When now we get to a crisis as we are now looking forward to in the next few months, although we are already in that crisis mode, the government has to reassess how best to get into, to manage together with the World Food Program, UNHCR. And that means that we have to provide for a budget. It calls for a budgetary intervention because what has been cut, the stoppage is resources in terms of the cereals that were coming. The monthly disbursement, the Baba Chakula, that has stopped. Even if Baba Chakula does not get reinstated, but there has to be support in terms of the food for sustaining the families in the camps. Previously, the government was supporting through emergency provision. And that, I think, is a way that government has to look at, because we cannot now keep the refugees without food in the camps, and then we are not even providing. The international community has engaged with us, and they have painted the dire situation that they are in. And this is even further compounded by the fact that the durable solution on resettlement to third country has also closed. That aperture where 2,000, 5,000 were going to America is closed. And so is in Canada, Germany. By the way, a month and a half ago, we returned to Kakuma from Nairobi, having processed them, done medical and everything else, ready to depart for Germany. 183 back to Kakuma. So you see the traumatic...
What happened? What happened exactly?
It happened that there's a new administration in
Germany.
In Germany.
Yeah.
And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where the refugee domicile responsibility is, said that having assessed their policies, they are no longer accepting refugee migrants. And you know that that administration won the elections on protect our borders.
Yes.
And many countries in the global north are moving that way, closing their borders, inward-looking policies that are not accommodative to the refugees. So for us as Africa, there is the African Union Protocol of 1969. I think we have never reactivated, it has never been activated for the continental approach in a humanitarian attention. IGAD has tried on a common policy for management of refugees, but as a country, now we feel very constrained, and in fact we feel abandoned, I would say that, because it is a joint effort. The principle of shared burden has been abdicated by the partners, and therefore the country has to reassess how, even as we continue hosting the 853,000 refugees, how are we going to manage? What is the long-term sustainability of this international obligation? Are we going to reassess it? What are we, how much can we take versus the national obligation of national interest?
And Commissioner, I'm not complaining, but why is it that this burden has been left to Kenya? I mean, I've grown up here in Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps, and now we are talking about from 300, 500,000, now we are 850, we are heading to almost 1 million.
Yes.
Why is this responsibility a Kenyan affair only?
Kenya is in the mix because you are signatory, you are part. It is a responsibility that we took ourselves.
How many do we have in Tanzania?
It is not,
Uganda?
it is every country that hosts refugees carries that burden, or carries that opportunity that you are hosting refugees. So it is how now the internal policies of the country, it is the one that now dictates what numbers you take. Because you can take, like I came from Netherlands, and they have again stopped. They were taken from Syria, from Ukraine. They have stopped. I've just said that Germany has stopped on it. So we can also say we are stopping as a country, and we now manage the numbers that we have. Because if we don't stop now, if we don't rethink, if we don't come up with a strategy of intervention and long-term sustainability and management of refugees, will be 1 million before the end of this year. So what? And if we also look at the figures, statistically speaking, 2023 we were 530. Now we are 853. In 10 years, that is in a 300,000 increase or spike of refugee influx in the country for 2 years. So if you do that 10 years, we'll have 3 million refugees. Is the country ready for that in terms of sustainability, in terms of resources, in terms of the pressure on security, in terms of RAD pressure, in terms of the tension with the host community? So those are issues that must be on the table when government is assessing what to do with the refugees long term.
As we are assessing, are we still picking more refugees right now, or we have already stopped, just like other countries have done?
We have not stopped because Kenya practices open door policy. So until that point that the government decides that we want to reassess, because informed by the stoppage of humanitarian assistance, the government now assesses its capacity to bridge the gap. If it cannot, if it was maybe $1 billion shillings, and the government wants to step in with $1 billion shillings to support in terms of food rations and all that, as part of the international obligation, so be it. If it feels that that cannot be directed in terms of humanitarian, and we are now caught against the wall. Why? We have these people here. So somehow the government has to look at an intervention that is sustainable in the immediate term. Because in the long term, we can reassess and say, we do verification. We emphasize on voluntary repatriation. But again, voluntary repatriation has a caveat. I have to volunteer. I have to step forward that I want to go back to Burundi. I want to go back to DRC. And again, there's also the international principle of non-refoulement. You cannot forcefully take a refugee back. You saw the debacle that was there.
I remember when you were talking about
Turkish. Yeah. Let's not go there. But basically, we are not supposed to push them out of our country. It is to look at how sustainably we can be able to do that. And by doing so, the government has to sit down with the international community and it is a time to bite the bullet.
And you'll be telling us all about the Shirika plan. But Stella, I'm looking at policy changes or reforms, just like Commissioner is talking about. Which socio-economic ones would you feel that could have an impact on refugees, and what role does FilmAid now here play in advocating for these changes? Because there have to be some changes, just like Commissioner has talked about. So
in my view, I think we are on the right path, even though it looks a little bit bleak, obviously, with the loss of US government support. And it's not in its entirety. It's partial loss, right? But you know, since 2016, first of all, the government of Kenya shifted from what we call encampment policy to settlement, and that's why we have the Kalobey integrated settlement. And in 2021, President Uhuru signed into law the Refugee Act of 2021. And at the beginning of last year, February 24, we had the regulations to regularize and enable the implementation of the Refugee Act. And I think these are really great strides, and you know, with government and the leadership of the Commissioner, we are really taking great strides into implementing the change, therefore, through the Shirika plan. And of course, it's a balancing act, because then you're talking about the resources that we need to invest in order to have the fruits of the Refugee Act, which are now going down. So I think it's a continued discussion and collaboration with our partners, who also remain steadfast irrespective of the challenges. You know, our donors continue to stand with us and to ensure that we are continuing to operate. We are collaborating in prioritizing what is there to sustain the most essential services. And I think the role of government is elevating, because you know, for the person again to become independent, it means what is contained in the 2021 Act is very important, which is, for example, ensuring that people can actually work, ensuring that the refugees can access business permits, and some of them are extremely savvy in doing businesses. And I think we know that as general knowledge, the Somali people are very savvy. The Ethiopian communities are very savvy. So giving them an enabling environment to work and to do business is some of the key changes that, you know, government actually is already working to enable in order to, again, to reduce the number of people that are fully dependent. So I think some of the things that are contained within the 2021 Refugee Act are very, very critical, which is then opening up that space for business across, at least even if it's within the two counties of Garissa and Turkana, that people can work and be independent. And if you look at, for example, education, you would be very surprised that there are many refugees that have done so well. It's just that there weren't enough resources for them either to go to higher education, but they are doing very well. At the end of the day, there is no difference between you and I and a refugee. It's only that you have access to better education and you've done well. So it's just giving really that platform for them to thrive. And that is really the difference, I think, is to create an environment for them to live their full potential, which is through the many different pathways. And I think, of course, a very critical one is, of course, education, but also business for those who have the capacity to do good business. And I think, you know, because we are Kenyan, is also, you know, they can pay taxes, they can contribute to the exchequer.
To the economy, yes.
Because if you're doing great business, it's okay to, and if you look at other models across the world, we talk often of, for example, in Jordan, refugees contributed greatly to the local economy. So I think it's looking at the successes that are out there and seeing what can be localized into this context. And I think business is definitely one avenue because it will serve both ways. And if we're able, for example, to build Garissa and Turkana in collaboration, in partnership, through what the refugees can contribute into that economy. Okay. And I think if you went there practically, you would be surprised about their capacities, about their passion, and just to be driven by the desire that my individual life can be better and I control it because I do business and I take care of my family.
Let me pick from where Stella has left in regards to the Refugee Act of 2021, a very good piece of legislation. And it was it introduced a number of legal measures granting refugees additional rights and also opportunities for inclusion. But now, in the wake of diminished funding, how does donor funding hinder the full implementation of this progressive legislation? And also, you can touch on Shirika Plan because it is also embedded in this law.
Section 28.8 of the Act provides that the refugees can be able to do entrepreneurship as an individual or as a group or as an association. It means, as Sarah has mentioned, that entrepreneurship, micro businesses and the bigger businesses is what we are looking at. And obviously the contribution for respective individual refugees and businesses towards the economy in terms of tax and revenue. What we have today, I want to take you back to 2018. The survey that was conducted by International Finance Corporation, IFC, in Kakuma, that found that there is a liquidity circulation of 50 billion annually within Kakuma. Meaning that is an economy on its own, that if it is harnessed, and that is the reason why they are interesting the private sector to go and invest in this area. In relation to government, we have developed Shirika Plan. Shirika Plan is a multi-year, multi-agency and multi-sector blueprint.
For how long are we looking at?
9 years.
From March of 2025?
Yes, we have 3 phases. Phase 1 is transition, where we expect that we do a lot of capacity building, a lot of systems development, policy reform, amendments to regulations and laws that would support now the rollout of Shirika Plan. We are also looking at integrated services. Today we are only accessing them education, health and water, and security. We want to expand that to agriculture. We want to expand that to entrepreneurship. We want to expand that to other skills and talents that they would be able to support them. As you are aware, nationally, of course, we have the aspect of the unemployment of the Kenyan citizens. So when we say that we are going to provide jobs for refugees, that is a lie. We would only say that we are going to develop a conducive environment for their entrepreneurship, for their self-reliance development. And last month, on 30th May, the government gazetted the telecommunication subscribers regulations, legal notice number 90. And at section 5E, it talks about the refugee owning a SIM card. And therefore, getting access to M-Pesa, getting access to online services, online businesses that they can do Bitcoin also. You never know. We are very techno-savvy refugees, courtesy of a barcode arrangement or training that has been done by UNHCR and partners in Kakuma, where I am the code, supports the host girls as well as the refugee girls in learning coding. And I'm talking about leveraging, how refugees can leverage on technology. And that is one of the steps in KYC, the Know Your Customer, where the refugees, about over 500,000, will be joining the telcos. And that makes a lot of difference in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of self-reliance, in terms of not registering your SIM card by proxy. Today, many of them have registered by proxy. But back to Shirika Plan, the three pillars of systems building, human skills and capital development, as well as integrated services, are the first core in terms of the transition. This is where we are supporting access, broadened access to education, access to health, including mental health support, prenatal, postnatal, all those activities to support the refugees. We are looking also at the environmental intervention. What are the climate related? You know that the refugee activity and hosting in Dadaab and Kakuma has affected a lot of environment in terms of the shrubs. The trees that were there have been cut because they use wood fuel. Alternatives in terms of LPG and solarization of facilities, including the boreholes. So all these are the interventions that will come with Shirika Plan. But the bottom line also is, as we are looking at self-reliance under Shirika Plan and sustainability of livelihoods, transformation of camps into integrated settlements, support through the World Bank and UN Habitat in the transformation of the habitations, we must first address the aspect of the humanitarian intervention, the daily food that one has to be able to look at. So Shirika Plan is long-term. Transition, stabilization, and resilience, going up to 2036. But in between here, what are we going to do? For every birth that is recorded in Kenya, we register. What is that child in the next 9 years as we implement Shirika Plan going to undertake? So those are the issues that we must be able to look at from a humanitarian perspective. Even as government is obligated, we need to be able to see the balance between humanitarian support, the international obligation, the national obligation, and obviously the rollout of Shirika Plan as a long-term solution to the intervention and sustainability of refugee hosting.
And because of the interest of time, when we come back, we'll be telling us what you're doing to curb the challenges that you are facing, and especially when it comes to security, because leave alone that the fact that we do not have adequate funding, but also there are security challenges on a normal day-to-day life. Stella, I'm looking at some of the projects that you guys are working on, and especially to empower these refugees, and especially in the wake of also, I'm quite sure you've also been hit by the reduced funding as well. Yeah. Or some upcoming as well.
So I think just to speak broadly, the operation is significantly affected, and I think in terms of the solutions, one solid one, of course, then is the collaboration and looking into the leadership of government into implementing the Shirika Plan that provides some of the solutions. But also it just means that we are looking into being more efficient, looking at I would say, looking at the way we have set our programs, and, it means, for example, bringing different types of programs together, merging different sectors and things like this. So I think for us is obviously trying to operate together and more efficiently, and actually also collaborating with government as well in programs, because most of the international organizations have huge experience and skill that they have brought into the operation. So we're hoping that really together we can progress. And I want to still commend that our donors or our international partners continue to be steadfast and to collaborate with us, and just ensuring that even though the situation is challenging, we are working together to ensure that we are defending the basic needs of the affected community, and taking the small steps to ensure that we are protecting really the investments of the last 30 years. That is education, is also tapping into the wealth of the people, and a lot of the work and the way we are working is putting actually refugees at the center of the response, because they know how better they can get the services. And sometimes if there is insecurity, or during COVID-19, they have led the responses. That means they have the wealth of knowledge, which is what we want to continue protecting and ensuring that it's continuing. And as Phil made, what we are keen on is, of course, to ensure that ecosystem of information, community awareness and engagement and dialogue, as it will be for all of us, to stay in dialogue enables us also to understand each other and address the challenges that may be there.
All right. You will be telling us how you are circumventing security challenges, among others, but let's quickly take a quick break, but we'll be right back. We are discussing the plight of the refugees, and especially in the wake of reduced funding. And as Commissioner is talking about, something needs to be done. We are at 30% and we are only going lower. From 60 to 45 to 30, we need to do something. Remember, the World Refugee Day is celebrated every 20th of June every year. So this is a very timely conversation. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News Check. We're on the tail end of this conversation. We are looking at the plight of refugees when it comes to socio-economic inclusion, and in the wake of reduced donor funding. Again, I have John Burugo, who is the Commissioner for Refugee Affairs in Kenya. Just next to me, we have Stella Suge, who is the Executive Director, Film Aid Kenya. And Commissioner and Director, kindly, because of the interest of time, what exactly are you doing because of security?
We have had a lot of challenges, including radicalization, IEDs in the camps, where we also have, in Kakuma, we had inter-clan fights, occasioning about 3,000 to migrate to Roiro. We had to take them back. We have security challenges. We also have small arms infiltrating from South Sudan, where we have all these kind of challenges. And what we are doing is collaborating with the international community, principally UNHCR. We have a partnership on managing security, where they are equipped with the necessary vehicles and other equipments to support and ensure that we are managing the camps remain secure. However, moving forward, we are also integrating the host community and the refugees in peace building, because it is a long term. The security personnel are just a number, very few against the 800,000 and also the host community. So the coexistence of the various communities, we have 26 nationalities within our camps, and meaning, therefore, we need to be able to get a balance, an accommodation and tolerance where the various communities live with each other, peacefully coexist, and they are able to act their living and sustainably support each other in the journey of life. So we are working both as enhancing security in terms of government, but also on the other part, working with partners, Film Aid included, in terms of building peace. And the National Cohesion for Integration Commission also has a 2-year program where they are building peace, principally also in Kakuma camp. And therefore, we have a multifaceted approach in relation to tackling the security. But insecurity remains a major challenge, even when we are doing the humanitarian assistance to the refugees. I want to end by requesting and inviting Kenyans to join us on Friday, when we have celebrated World Refugee Day, with the theme of in solidarity with the refugees, where the communities want to feel that we are working, empathizing with them in this journey of displacement and conflict-related flight.
Where exactly will be the celebrations?
We will be at the Kenya Christian Industrial Training Institute
KCCT.
at Isili. That is where we will be in Nairobi. But also in the camps, Dadaab and Kakuma, Dagahare in Dadaab, and in Kakuma, they will also be at Kakuma Stadium.
And Stella, as we wrap up, what can you tell us in regards to what we are looking forward to? Because from the statistics, they don't look very encouraging in terms of funding.
So I think there's definitely different perspectives to look at this. And just for me as a Kenyan, is really to say that the people who are in our country are actually just our neighbors. They are all our brothers. So I think to really keep the empathy, when we talk about in solidarity, it just means that it's really looking at each person. It's not to generalize. There may be issues within, but a lot of those people have been displaced for reasons beyond themselves. So it's really to keep the empathy for the people that are within our countries. And each individual person, in fact, really can make a difference. And just to give an example, one of our alumni, who's also the Nansen Award winner, Abdullahi Mire, at individual level has been able to rally support for education, not as an NGO, not as a donor, but at a personal level. Each person can make a difference. So I think we need to change our mindset about our brothers and sisters who've been forcibly displaced and have come into our country. And I think one of the key players that could step up is also the private sector. We are talking about close to 1 million people. That's a massive economy for which also, as we are making strides on the policy level, operationalizing the act, it just means that it's opening up from the business front, and it means the private sector can actually engage and be present in Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps.
Maybe Commissioner, you wrap it up for us?
I believe that where the refugees are here with us, it is important. First is to understand from where they have come from in relation to the humanitarian challenges of safety and security, which we are providing as a government. And again, to appeal to Kenyans to understand that refugees, nobody wishes to be a refugee. Refugees are also human. And that is why our act also provides that we respect the human rights of the refugees. We accord them the freedoms. We give them the opportunity to make a difference in their lives, to recollect the pieces that were lost from when they sought the flight, while hosting them in the country. It is our commitment as a government to meet our international obligation, but also call upon the international community to step forward, because the uncertainties that are there in durable solutions of resettlement, voluntary repatriation, and expecting that the government will wholly take the localization durable solution alone is not fair. And we would want to have a fair environment in which the refugees feel at home, and the strain on the Kenyan government and the citizenry is not there. That there is also the expectation of the international community meeting its part of the bargain.
Thank you. That has been the Commissioner for Refugee Affairs, Bwana John Mburugu, and we also have Stella Suge, who is Executive Director, Film Aid Kenya. We have been looking at the socio-economic inclusion of refugees as we observe the World Refugee Day on 20th of June. And as Commissioner has said, indeed, we are not... the refugees are not going anywhere, so we really need to find ways of ensuring that even their stay is made a little bit conducive in the wake of reduced donor funding. Many thanks indeed for joining us on this first hour. On this second hour, we are looking at people, power, politics,